February 23rd, 1943, Luftwaffe, Base Morozovskaya, 30 kilometers west of the Don River. Oberst Heinrich Nadler stood before 47 pilots in the base briefing room, the iron stove in the corner doing little against the Stalingrad winter still gripping the region. They had been summoned at 0600 hours, exhausted from another sleepless night. The third consecutive evening, their operations had been disrupted by raids targeting ammunition stores and supply depots. 5 tons of aviation fuel had burned the previous night. 12 mechanics were in the field hospital with shrapnel wounds. Nadler's own quarters had been hit 48 hours earlier, forcing him to sleep in the administrative building. His superiors in Berlin were demanding explanation, and Nadler had none that wouldn't sound absurd. "Gentlemen, we are being terrorized by women flying crop dusters." Major Klaus Reinhardt laughed first, a sharp bark that echoed off the concrete walls. The room erupted. "Wooden biplanes from 1928, Hauptmann Josef Weber added, raising his coffee cup in mock toast. "Perhaps we should recruit our grandmothers to fly against them, Herr Oberst. They have comparable experience with antiques." More laughter. Someone suggested sending rifles instead of fighters. Another proposed launching nets to catch the fragile canvas wing. Nadler allowed it to continue for 30 seconds before raising his hand. "High Command has authorized increased night patrols. These inconveniences will be eliminated within the week. We have Ju-88s. They have firewood with propellers. Physics favors the superior machine." The officers nodded, returning to their morning briefings with renewed confidence. The matter was settled. What Oberst Nadler didn't know was that at that precise moment, Senior Lieutenant Nadezhda Popova was already airborne 16 kilometers south, her Polikarpov Po-2 biplane climbing through darkness toward his fuel depot. The 21-year-old navigator from Donetsk had completed her 347th mission the previous night and was advancing steadily toward what would eventually become an unprecedented 852 combat sorties, more than any woman in aviation history. She had survived 17 direct hits, landed 3 times with damaged control surface, and personally delivered over 23 tons of high explosives onto German positions using nothing more than a wooden aircraft designed for training student pilots 15 years earlier. In 46 hours, Nadler's replacement fuel shipment, hastily diverted from Rostov, would burn for 6 hours after Popova's bombs found their mark. He would file his 3rd consecutive report explaining losses he couldn't prevent to weapons he couldn't see, delivered by pilots he couldn't catch. German night-air defense doctrine, perfected since 1939, represented 5 years of brutal lessons written in blood and wreckage. After losing 127 aircraft to preventable accidents during the Battle of Britain, the Luftwaffe had systematically engineered solutions to every identified failure point. Enclosed cockpits became mandatory after 14 pilots froze to death at altitude over the Channel in November 1940. Radio communication was installed as standard equipment following 23 mid-air collisions between friendly aircraft operating in darkness without coordination. Parachutes, initially considered optional dead weight, became required after analysis revealed 30% of pilot deaths were survivable if escape equipment existed. Each requirement emerged from specific casualties, each regulation purchased with German lives. By 1942, doctrine established minimum performance standards no combat aircraft could violate. 180 miles per hour, minimum speed to ensure intercept capability, twin engines for redundancy, enclosed cockpit for crew survival, radio for tactical coordination. The Junkers Ju-88 embodied these principles perfectly. 300 miles per hour, maximum velocity, crew of 4 with specialized role. Few G-220 Liechtenstein radar for target acquisition in complete darkness. 2,400 horsepower from twin Jumo engine. Oxygen systems, heated flight suits, armor plating, protecting vital crew positions. Between 1940 and 1942, Ju-88 night fighters had destroyed 357 British bombers over Germany, establishing themselves as the most effective interceptors in theater. German confidence wasn't arrogant. It was earned through documented victories against modern, well-equipped adversaries. While German engineers perfected these requirements, Nadezhda Popova was proving them irrelevant. On December 8, 1942, she navigated her POW toward a German artillery position near Kropotkin without radio communication, using hand signals to coordinate with her pilot in the forward cockpit. No parachute was aboard, the aircraft's 500-meter operational ceiling making survival equipment pointless if mechanical failure occurred. Their maximum speed of 94 miles per hour meant German doctrine classified the PO2 as theoretically unable to conduct offensive operations, too slow to penetrate defended airspace or escape pursuit. The mission succeeded anyway. 2 bombs found the artillery battery's ammunition store, creating secondary explosions visible from base 32 kilometers away. This was mission 287 of what would eventually become 852, and German intelligence reports from the sector noted only unexplained explosions consistent with sabotage, origin unknown. They never considered the wooden biplanes circling overhead at speeds their doctrine had declared operationally impossible. The Soviet response violated every principle German doctrine established. The Polikarpov PO2, designed in 1928 by Nikolai Polikarpov as a primary trainer, represented aviation stripped to absolute fundamental. Wood frame and canvas covering, no metal structural elements beyond engine mounts and landing gear. Open cockpit to expose crews directly to elements without protection of any kind. At operational altitude, temperatures reached minus 40 degrees Celsius. Frostbite was universal. Pilots breathed through cloth masks to prevent moisture from freezing on control surfaces. Their exhaled breath forming ice crystals on eyelashes that had to be manually cleared to maintain vision. No equipment whatsoever. No radio. Coordination accomplished entirely through hand signals between aircraft flying in formation darkness. No parachute. The pointless weight removed from aircraft that operated too low for deployment anyway. No armor. No self-sealing fuel tank. No fire suppression system. Complete exposure. Specifications revealed the absurdity. Maximum speed, 94 miles per hour, exactly half the German minimum standard. 100 horsepower M11 5-cylinder radial engine versus the Ju-88's 2,400 combined horsepower. Unit cost approximately $5,000 compared to $80,000 for German Interceptor. Production time, 3 weeks versus 3 months. The PO2 was older than most pilots flying it, a museum piece converted into a makeshift bomber through the simple expedient of mounting bomb racks beneath the lower wing and loading high explosives manually. Women flew these wooden trainers against modern metal interceptors, dropping bombs by hand, navigating by stars and landmarks, communicating through gestures in darkness. What German engineers saw as fatal weakness, Nadezhda Popova, transformed into advantage. The PO2's primitive simplicity enabled impossibly rapid mission turnaround. 4 minutes to refuel from hand pump, 3 minutes to reload 2 50-kilogram bombs, 7 minutes total between landing and takeoff. German bombers required 45 minutes minimum ground time for comparable operation, their complexity demanding specialized equipment and trained ground crews. Popova's regiment could fly 8 sorties per aircraft per night, while German squadrons managed 2. On March 31, 1943, she completed 18 missions between sunset and sunrise, a single-night record no other pilot ever matched. The wooden construction that appeared suicidal proved paradoxically survivable. Bullets passed through canvas fabric and wood frames without encountering systems to destroy. On July 17, 1943, a German fighter raked her aircraft with 24-round wing-mounted cannon. 24 holes appeared in wings and fuselage. 0 critical systems were hit because none existed to hit. The aircraft remained flyable. Popova completed her mission, landed safely, and ground crews patched the holes with fabric and glue in 37 minutes. She flew again that night. "If I'd been flying one of their metal coffins," she said years later, "that bullet would have ricocheted around the cockpit until it found me. Germans designed aircraft to fight their war. We designed tactics to fight ours." An official Luftwaffe technical assessment from April 1943 concluded the following. Soviet deployment of female pilots in obsolete Polikarpov PO2 training aircraft represents desperate improvisation consistent with documented shortages across all military branches. Analysis indicates severe pilot shortage and declining manufacturing capacity, forcing utilization of inadequate equipment and undertrained personnel. Wooden construction, primitive systems architecture, complete absence of defensive armament or protective equipment render aircraft extremely vulnerable to all forms of modern air defense. Physics remains immutable. Speed superiority, metal structural integrity, and modern avionics will invariably defeat slow, wooden, obsolete platforms regardless of pilot determination. Current calculations predict Soviet operations will cease within 4 to 6 months due to unsustainable attrition. Our advantages present overwhelming numerical superiority: 3.2 to 1 speed ratio, 24 to 1 horsepower differential, 15 to 1 cost efficiency, enabling replacement production exceeding loss rates. Assessment categorizes impact as temporary morale disruption through sleep deprivation and minor supply inconvenience only. No serious operational threat to logistics infrastructure or combat operations exists. Recommendation: monitor activities but do not prioritize development specialized countermeasures. Standard interception protocols sufficient for elimination when strategically convenient. This assessment carried the full authority of Reichsluftfahrtministerium and represented the consensus of Germany's premier aeronautical engineers. It was wrong. While German High Command dismissed the threat, Nadezhda Popova was systematically dismantling their supply infrastructure. On April 19, 1943, 11 days after the assessment's distribution, she navigated her POW-2 to a rail junction near Taman, where German logistics concentrated ammunition shipments destined for Cuban bridgehead. Her bombs severed the main line and ignited 3 freight cars containing artillery shells. The resulting explosions destroyed an additional 7 cars and rendered the junction inoperable for 6 days. German logistics officers recorded unexplained losses inconsistent with known Soviet capabilities in reports that month. By this point, Popova had conducted over 420 missions, rapidly approaching the 852 that would eventually make her one of the most decorated Soviet pilots. The temporary inconvenience was accumulating into strategic impact doctrine couldn't explain. The Germans had made a fatal calculation error. Their logic seemed perfectly sound. Junkers, Ju-88, cruising at 300 miles per hour versus Polikarpov PO-2. Maximum speed, 94 miles per hour equals 3.2 times speed advantage. Simple mathematics should guarantee easy interception and destruction. Faster aircraft overtakes slower aircraft, brings weapons to bear, eliminates target. What they critically overlooked was that aerial interception requires matching target speed, not merely exceeding it. The aerodynamic paradox centered on stall speed, the minimum velocity below which airfoil lift cannot sustain flight. The Ju-88 stalled at approximately 120 miles per hour. Below that threshold, insufficient airflow over wings caused loss of lift, loss of control, catastrophic descent. German pilots approaching stall speed experienced violent buffeting, nose-heavy pitching, wing dropping. Recovery required immediate throttle application and altitude loss. The PO-2 operated comfortably at 80 miles per hour and could glide with engine idled at 60 miles per hour, well below German minimum survivable velocity. The PO-2 flew beneath the speed at which German interceptors could physically remain airborne. This created an impossible tactical scenario. German pilots attempting engagement must either maintain safe speed and fly past too rapidly to acquire targets, or reduce speed to match and risk catastrophic stall. No middle ground existed in the physics. On September 14, 1942, near Stalingrad, Hauptmann Werner Schmidt attempted intercept of a PO-2 formation, reported attacking supply convoy. Schmidt reduced throttle to 130 miles per hour, attempting to slow sufficiently for weapons engagement. The Soviet pilot, detecting the approaching fighter through engine noise, immediately throttled to minimum power and descended to 70 miles per hour glide. Schmidt's aircraft immediately displayed stall warning. Control surfaces buffeted, the nose pitched downward, despite full elevator input. Stall horn activated. Schmidt was forced to add throttle and abort engagement, or enter unrecoverable stall dive. He made 3 additional passes. Each time, the Soviet aircraft reduced speed below his minimum capability. Schmidt's after-action report noted, target speed below minimum engagement threshold. Interception impossible without controlled flight loss. Request tactical guidance. No guidance existed. because no solution existed to the physics problem. Understanding this aerodynamic reality made Nadezhda Popova untouchable. On June 4, 1943, during her 512th mission of her eventual 852, radar-equipped German fighters detected her formation approaching supply depot outside Novorossiysk. She immediately recognized engine sounds indicating intercept attempt, throttled engine to minimum power, descended to 150 meters altitude. German pilot made first pass at 200 miles per hour, overshooting by 300 meters before banking capability allowed return. Second pass at reduced speed. Popova decreased further to 65 miles per hour glide. German approach stall threshold, wings exhibiting visible oscillation in moonlight. Third attempt, the interceptor reduced to estimated 125 miles per hour, exactly at stall boundary. Wings wobble, nose drop. German added full throttle and climbed to safe speed. Abandoned engagement. Popova restarted engine, completed mission, destroyed ammunition stockpile, returned to base. This tactic, repeated across her 852 mission, proved the POWs' slowness was its greatest weapon. German engineers calculated thrust, weight, speed, firepower. They calculated everything except one variable. You cannot intercept what flies slower than your minimum speed. And Nadezhda Popova flew slower than physics allowed Germans to chase. The stall speed paradox that had already frustrated Hauptmann Schmidt and dozens of German pilots attempting intercept was only the first of three advantages the Night Witches possess. German fighters had been optimized specifically for intercepting modern Soviet bombers, the Ilyushin Il-4 and Petlyakov PE-2, that cruised at 250 miles per hour or faster. Every aspect of Junkers Ju-88 and Messerschmitt Bf-110 design reflected this mission: high-speed pursuit capability, rapid acceleration, heavy armament for quick kills. But physics remained immutable. Aircraft must maintain minimum velocity, or aerodynamic lift fails and the machine falls. A Ju-88 cruising at 300 miles per hour attempting to engage a target moving at 80 miles per hour faced impossible geometry. Overshooting was inevitable. The differential meant German pilots closed at 220 miles per hour relative velocity. At that speed, target acquisition through gun sights lasted approximately 2 to 3 seconds before the fighter flew past. Slowing to 150 miles per hour brought the Ju-88 dangerously close to its 120 mile per hour stall threshold. Control surfaces became mushy. Response time degraded. Any combat maneuvering risked catastrophic stall. The POW-2, operating comfortably at 80 miles per hour, capable of gliding at 60 miles per hour with engine idled, existed in an untouchable velocity zone. German pilots had been trained for pursuit engagement against comparable speed adversaries, not precision slow-speed interception, requiring sustained flight at stall boundary. Weapons lock proved impossible when target remained in gun sight for under 3 seconds. On August 9, 1943, Nadezhda Popova demonstrated this advantage on her 623rd mission, approaching a German fuel depot outside Temriuk. At 40 hours, she detected a Bf-110 fighter by the distinctive sound of its twin Daimler-Benz engine, moonlight reflecting off its metal fuselage 3,000 feet above her position. Her immediate response required no thought after 600 previous missions. Throttled her M11 engine to minimum power, reducing airspeed to 65 miles per hour. The German fighter made its first pass at estimated 280 miles per hour, overshooting by 400 meters before banking capability allowed course reversal. Second pass at reduced velocity, Popova decreased further to 60 miles per hour glide. The Bf-110 attempted to match speed, reducing to approximately 140 miles per hour. Even at that dangerous velocity, still more than twice her speed. Third pass, the German pilot approached his aircraft's absolute minimum controllable speed, wings exhibiting visible buffeting, nose pitching downward despite elevator input. Fourth pass, abandoned entirely as the fighter climbed back to safe operational altitude. Each failed intercept gave Popova additional minutes to adjust her approach vector toward target. She completed her bombing run, while the German fighter burned irreplaceable aviation fuel, attempting engagement geometry that physics made impossible. This tactic, perfected over hundreds of missions advancing toward her eventual 852, had become reflexive. The target, a fuel storage facility containing 40,000 liters of diesel, burned for 11 hours. German incident reports noted target destruction, but recorded fighter engagement as unsuccessful due to extreme target evasion capability. The PO-2 returned to base without damage. The second advantage emerged from what Germans considered the PO-2's greatest vulnerability: its canvas and wood construction. German ammunition had been engineered specifically for destroying metal aircraft. When bullets struck aluminum fuselage, they penetrated the metal skin, created shrapnel from torn material, then ricocheted inside the enclosed space, seeking vital systems. Fuel lines ruptured, hydraulic systems severed, control cables snap, crew members hit by bullets or secondary shrapnel. Armor-piercing rounds designed to penetrate protective plating wasted their kinetic energy on aircraft with no armor to defeat. Incendiary tracers ignited fuel vapors in enclosed metal fuel tanks. The physics of metal warfare. Canvas aircraft operated under completely different material dynamics. Bullets passed through fabric, creating clean holes, then exited without energy transfer. No shrapnel generated from torn canvas. No ricochets inside non-existent enclosed spaces. Wood frames absorbed impacts only if bullets directly struck structural spars, which occupied perhaps 5% of total airframe volume. Vital systems, the engine, fuel tank, and 2 crew members represented minimal target cross-section. Canvas tears affected aerodynamics negligibly. A 10-centimeter hole in wing fabric reduced lift by less than 1%. Repairs required 30 minutes with needle, thread, and fabric patches versus metal damage requiring hours of welding, riveting, and structural verification. German pilots consistently reported hitting targets but observing no visible effect. Intelligence reports noted with frustration multiple confirmed strikes without corresponding target destruction. Bullets appear to pass through without effect. During her 698th mission on October 23, 1943, Nadezhda Popova proved this advantage with devastating clarity. Approaching an ammunition storage complex near Kerch, searchlights caught her aircraft at 800 meters altitude. German anti-aircraft positions opened fire immediately. MG-42 machine gun, 20mm flak cannons, everything within range. Her aircraft took concentrated fire for approximately 40 seconds before she cleared the target zone. Ground crew inspection after landing revealed 42 bullet holes, 17 holes in the upper wing fabric alone, scattered across 3 meters of wingspan, 12 holes in fuselage canvas between cockpit, 8 holes in tail surface, 5 holes in lower wing, 0 hits to engine, fuel tank, control cables, or crew. 1 bullet had passed through the navigator's cockpit exactly 40 centimeters behind where Popova sat, entering through starboard fabric and exiting through port fabric without encountering anything solid. The aircraft remained completely airworthy. Ground crew patched the holes with fabric and aircraft dope in 37 minutes. Popova flew 2 additional missions that night in the same damaged aircraft, adding missions 699 and 700 to her count toward 852. The PO-2 would carry her through 96 more missions before structural fatigue required retirement. Years later, she would state plainly, "In their metal planes, I would have been dead. Bullets would have found fuel, found hydraulics, found me. Canvas saved my life because there was nothing for bullets to destroy." But the third advantage proved most devastating to German morale. The tactic that would give the 588th Night Bomber Regiment their nickname that German soldiers whispered with genuine fear. German air defense systems, searchlight batteries, and anti-aircraft artillery position relied fundamentally on acoustic detection for targeting. Sound-ranging equipment triangulated engine noise to establish aircraft position and trajectory. Standard defensive protocol operated on acoustic triggers. Operators heard engine, calculated approach vector, activated searchlights to acquire visual confirmation. Anti-aircraft batteries opened fire on illuminated targets. Fighter aircraft scrambled if threat assessed as significant. The entire system required audible warning. Night witches discovered, possibly through accidental engine failure initially, that their PO-2 aircraft could idle engines completely and glide in absolute silence. The tactic evolved into systematic doctrine. Approach target area at 8,000 feet altitude with engines at full throttle. Germans heard them coming, prepared defenses, searchlights swept sky, anti-aircraft crews manned position. At 3,000 feet altitude, approximately 5 kilometers from target, cut engines completely. The M11 radial engine shut down, propeller windmill to stop. Total silence. The PO2's glide ratio, approximately 1 to 10, meant the aircraft descended 1 foot for every 10 feet of forward progress. From 3,000 feet, altitude equaled 30,000 potential gliding distance, roughly 5.6 miles. At 60 miles per hour, glide speed, the silent approach lasted 5 to 6 minutes. The only sound produced was soft wind rustling through canvas wing fabric, a whisper Germans described as resembling a broom sweeping across floor. Psychological effect was immediate and profound. German defenders heard engines, prepared for attack, then heard nothing, saw nothing. Searchlights swept empty darkness, then explosion. Bombs falling from silent sky they couldn't defend against because they couldn't detect what made no sound. On the night of March 31st, 1943, Nadezhda Popova used this silent approach 18 times, a single-night record no other pilot ever matched or approached. On her 7th sortie of 18 that night, she targeted a German regimental command post near Krimsky, a high-value target protected by 3 searchlight batteries and concentrated anti-aircraft position. Standard approach with engine audible, climbing to 7,800 feet, while German defenders tracked her progress acoustically. Searchlights activate, sweeping her anticipated flight path. Anti-aircraft crews prepared firing solution. At 3,200 feet, she cut the engine entirely. Propeller stop. Silence. She glided directly over German position, close enough to hear soldiers calling to each other below in the darkness. Wo sind die Flugzeuge? Ich höre nichts. Where are the aircraft? I hear nothing. Searchlights continued sweeping sky behind her, seeking engines they could no longer hear, while she positioned directly above the command post, released both 50-kilogram bombs from 500 meters altitude. The explosions illuminated German faces looking upward at empty darkness, trying to understand where death had come from. She restarted her engine only after clearing the immediate target area, the sudden sound causing searchlights to whip toward her position, 2 kilometers away. By then, she was already descending toward base for refueling and reloading. She would repeat this silent approach through all 18 missions that night. Total darkness her ally, silence her weapon. Accumulated across her eventual 852 mission, the tactic became signature warfare. German soldiers learned to fear the silence more than the bomb. The silence meant the bombs were already falling, already too late, death arriving on whisper of wind through canvas. She said years later, "We were ghosts they couldn't fight. Their technology made sound. Our primitiveness made silence. They feared the silence more than the bomb." German technical superiority, on paper, meant nothing in operational reality. The statistics that impressed Reichsluftfahrtministerium engineers translated poorly to combat effective. Junkers, Ju-88 specifications remained impressive in technical documentation. 300 miles per hour, maximum velocity, 2,400 horsepower from twin Junkers. Jumo engines, Fujoat 220 Liechtenstein radar for target acquisition, full radio communications, armor protection for crew position, 4 specialized crew members operating coordinated system. Manufacturing cost $80,000 per unit, requiring 3 months production time with skilled precision labor. But operational tempo revealed different mathematics. Ju-88 night fighters managed 1 to 2 sorties per night maximum. Each mission required 3 to 4 hours maintenance between flights. Systems verification, complete refueling from specialized equipment, rearming ammunition and ordnance, crew rest and debriefing, 4 men coordinating in high-stress environment, fatigue accumulating across consecutive nights, judgment degrading with sleep deprivation. Average Ju-88 night fighter operational career lasted 40 to 60 missions before aircraft loss or crew rotation. Survival rate approximately 60%, with losses distributed across combat damage, weather incidents, navigation errors, and mechanical failure. Many German night fighter crews never encountered enemy aircraft before their own deaths. The Polikarpov PO2 existed in completely opposite operational reality. Specifications remained primitive in documentation. 94 miles per hour, a maximum velocity, 100 horsepower from single M11 radial engine, zero radar, zero radio, zero armor, crew of 2 women. Manufacturing cost $5,000 per unit, requiring 3 weeks production time with minimal skilled labor. But operational tempo created asymmetric advantage. Night Witches routinely flew 8 to 18 sorties per night. Maintenance between missions required 7 minutes total, 4 minutes for hand pump refueling, 3 minutes for manual bomb loading by ground crew. 2-woman crews who had flown together for hundreds of missions operated with non-verbal coordination born from repetition. Average Night Witch career exceeded 800 missions, some pilots surpassing 1,000 combat sorties. Regiment survival rate reached 96.8%, with losses almost entirely from concentrated ground fire, not fighter interception. The paradox was complete and undeniable. More expensive, sophisticated aircraft produced lower operational effectiveness. Simpler, cheaper aircraft produced higher operational effectiveness, measured in combat missions completed per unit time. German advantage in technology became disadvantage in logistics. Every hour German night fighters spent in maintenance was another hour Soviet PO2 aircraft were flying mission. These statistics were embodied in Nadezhda Popova's operational record with brutal clarity. On March 31st, 1943, that record-breaking night of 18 missions, she demonstrated operational tempo. German pilots couldn't comprehend. Started operations at 2200 hours, concluded at 0530 hours, 7.5 hours of continuous operation, 18 complete mission cycles. Average 25 minutes per cycle, including flight to target, bombing run, return flight, refueling, reloading, and immediate relaunch. Her ground crew, 2 mechanics and 3 armament specialists, could prepare her aircraft faster than she could walk from brief debriefing to cockpit. Total bombs dropped that night, 36 50-kilogram high-explosive bombs, 1,800 kilograms total ordnance. German positions hit included ammunition dump outside Krimskaya, vehicle parking area near Moldovanskoye, artillery battery positions, supply depot, regimental command post, troop barracks, fuel storage, and communications center. German casualties estimated at 94 killed, over 200 wounded, with material losses exceeding 3 million Reichsmarks in destroyed equipment and supplies. The most accomplished Luftwaffe night fighter pilot in theater during that period, who remained unidentified in Soviet records, but whose performance was documented in captured German reports, flew maximum 4 sorties in a single night, considered extraordinary performance worthy of commendation. Popova flew 18. By this point in the war, her accumulating mission count toward 852 was becoming legendary, even among German soldiers who knew her aircraft by sound and feared the silence that followed. Wehrmacht logistics officers were recording a disturbing pattern in their resource allocation reports, though few would admit publicly what the mathematics revealed. German expenditure attempting to counter Night Witch operations, specifically isolated from broader air defense costs, exceeded any rational cost-benefit threshold. Anti-aircraft ammunition, over 2 million rounds, documented as fired at Night Witch formations specifically, based on acoustic signatures and engagement reports. At 50 Reichsmarks per anti-aircraft shell, total ammunition cost exceeded 100 million Reichsmark, equivalent to $40 million American currency. Fighter sortie. Over 1,000 dedicated intercept attempts, documented across 2 years of operation, averaging 500 Reichsmarks operational cost per sortie, including fuel, ammunition, maintenance, and crew support. 500,000 Reichsmarks total. Searchlight batteries. Over 200 units deployed specifically for night harassment defense, each unit requiring crew of 6, generator equipment, maintenance support. Personnel allocation. Over 5,000 German soldiers assigned to counter-night harassment operations that could have been deployed to frontline combat positions. Total German investment in attempting to stop the Night Witches exceeded 50 million Reichsmarks for direct operational costs, not including broader strategic resource diversion. Soviet investment in creating the 588th Night Bomber Regiment that produced these costs remained absurdly minimal by comparison. 40 Polikarpov PO2 aircraft at $5,000 each equaled $200,000 total aircraft cost. Bombs represented marginal ammunition expenses, simple, high-explosive charges costing fraction of defensive ammunition expended against them. Personnel: 80 pilots and navigators, minimal ground crew, total regiment strength approximately 150 women. Total Soviet investment under $2 million American dollars for entire regiment equipment, training, and 2 years of operational support. The cost ratio was stark and undeniable. Germans were spending 25 times more trying to stop what Soviets spent creating. Effectiveness ratio was equally brutal. Germans achieved 0 confirmed fighter kills on Night Witch aircraft across documented operations. Result was perfect asymmetric warfare. Minimal investment producing maximum enemy resource drain. Every Reichsmark spent on unsuccessful Night Witch interception was a Reichsmark unavailable for Eastern Front operation, where it might have produced actual military value. Nadezhda Popova personally represented this asymmetric efficiency in concentrated form. If German anti-aircraft positions fired an average 1,000 rounds attempting to hit her aircraft per mission, conservative estimate based on engagement reports, her missions through this point advancing toward 852 total meant approximately 700,000 rounds fired specifically at her. At 50 Reichsmarks per round, Germans had expended 35 million Reichsmarks attempting to kill one Soviet lieutenant. Result? She survived, continued flying. Her bombs destroyed documented targets, including 3 ammunition trucks, 7 supply depots, 2 fuel storage facilities, 12 vehicle concentration, 4 artillery positions, multiple command posts, and communication centers. Value of German material destroyed conservatively estimated at 18 million Reichsmarks, not including personnel casualties or operational disruption costs. The comparison to other Allied bomber operations was stark. Average United States Army Air Force bomber crew was rotated home after completing 25 missions, considered full combat tour. Popova's current mission represented equivalent of 34 complete American combat tours. She had flown more combat sorties than entire squadrons of German night fighters. Her 852 eventual missions would represent the most cost-effective weapon deployment in Soviet arsenal, measured by enemy resources consumed versus friendly resources invested. German high command was beginning to realize that killing women in wooden biplanes was costing more than those women were costing the Soviets, and Nadezhda Popova had no intention of stopping. As German high command grappled with the resource drain that Night Witch operations represented, frontline intelligence was about to deliver a revelation that would transform embarrassment into humiliation. November 14, 1942, near Maikop in the Caucasus region, the German 13th Panzer Division overran a Soviet airfield during a rapid advance following breakthrough operation. The evacuation had been hasty, disorganized. Soviet ground crews abandoned equipment, supplies, documentation in their retreat. German intelligence officers arrived within hours to catalog captured material. Among standard documents, flight rosters, maintenance logs, operations order, one intelligence officer, Hauptmann Fritz Alder, found a personnel roster for the 588th Night Bomber Regiment. The names were unmistakably feminine. He checked again, assuming clerical error or mistranslation. Every pilot listed carried female given names and patronymics. Lieutenant Nadezhda Popova, Lieutenant Yevdokia Bershanskaya, Lieutenant Irina Sabrova, 40 names total. He cross-referenced with flight logs found in the operations tent. Same names appeared across hundreds of mission entries spanning 6 months. Not instructor, not ferry pilot, combat pilots logging 8 to 12 missions per night, night after night. Awards, citations found in a separate folder referenced these same names with military decorations for combat valor. The documentation was consistent, detailed, impossible to dismiss as propaganda fabrication. Alder's report sent up chain of command carried the marking urgent, verification required, unprecedented operational intelligence. The report reached Battalion Commander Oberstleutnant Werner Krebs within 6 hours. His initial response, documented in division records, was immediate dismissal. Soviet propaganda attempt. Captured documents were frequently falsified to confuse German intelligence. He filed the report with notation, likely disinformation. Recommend no action. 3 days later, A second captured document set arrived from different sector, 120 kilometers north. Different unit, different intelligence office, identical finding. The 588th Regiment personnel were female. Division commander demanded verification. Corps-level intelligence received the reports with skepticism that transformed into concern as confirmations arrived from multiple sectors simultaneously. By early December 1942, Wehrmacht intelligence had compiled documentation from 4 separate captures, prisoner interrogation, and aerial reconnaissance photographs showing aircraft with identified serial numbers appearing in raid reports across 3 months. Cross-referencing was conclusive. The Night Witch raids that had cost millions in resources, disrupted thousands of hours of sleep, destroyed hundreds of tons of materiel, were being conducted by women flying obsolete training aircraft. On December 18, 1942, a formal briefing was presented to Army Group A headquarters. General der Infantry, Rudolf Conrad, presided. Intelligence officers presented captured rosters, flight logs, photographs, prisoner statements. The room of senior officers, many veterans of Poland, France, and 2 years of Eastern Front operation, confronted evidence that their most persistent tactical irritation was being inflicted by female pilots averaging 21 years of age, flying 15-year-old wooden biplanes. The conclusion was unavoidable and professionally devastating. The harassment operations that had consumed enormous defensive resources were the work of women. The revelation created a crisis within Wehrmacht command structure that was simultaneously operational and ideological. Initial reaction across command levels was categorical disbelief. Multiple officers demanded additional proof, suggesting the documentation was elaborate deception. The disbelief phase lasted approximately 3 weeks as additional confirmations arrived. Then came humiliation. Elite Luftwaffe pilots trained for years in modern fighter aircraft had been systematically beaten by women flying agricultural trainers. Several pilots requested immediate transfer rather than continue operations where their failure would be attributed to being bested by female adversaries. The propaganda implications were assessed as catastrophic. How could Wehrmacht High Command explain to German public and frontline troops that their advanced military was being harassed successfully by Soviet women? Nazi ideological doctrine regarding women's proper roles, emphasized relentlessly in domestic propaganda, contradicted fundamentally with operational reality on Eastern Front. If women could achieve this level of combat effectiveness, what other assumptions about Soviet capabilities were dangerously wrong? The practical military concern competed with ideological discomfort throughout command structure. Specific institutional responses revealed the depth of psychological impact. Luftwaffe High Command issued directives actively suppressing information about Night Witch personnel composition. Official Luftwaffe Directive 8843, dated January 7, 1943, specified all references to enemy night harassment unit personnel in official combat reports and intelligence assessments shall employ standard military terminology without reference to gender composition. This directive is issued to maintain operational focus on tactical threat assessment and prevent speculation that may adversely impact unit morale and combat effectiveness. The directive was distributed to all Eastern Front air units with classification marking not for general distribution. Despite official suppression, frontline soldiers' reactions differed substantially from command-level responses. Among troops experiencing nightly raids, grudging respect mixed with superstitious fear. The nickname Nachthexen, Night Witches, spread organically through frontline positions despite official discouragement of the term. Some German units began submitting requests for dedicated anti-Night Witch defensive resources, acknowledging implicitly that standard air defense protocols had failed. Other units refused to acknowledge gender in reports, focusing exclusively on tactical characteristics of the threat. The psychological impact manifested differently across ranks, but universally represented acknowledgement that German military doctrine had fundamentally underestimated this adversary. While German command struggled with the revelation, Nadezhda Popova was flying her 412th mission, completely unaware that Germans had just confirmed her identity and gender. The discovery changed nothing from her perspective because the mission remained unchanged. destroy German military capability. She knew Soviet intelligence monitored German communication and would report any significant German response. But whether Germans knew she was female was tactically irrelevant to bombing accuracy. The night Germans confirmed the 588th Regiment's composition through captured documents at Maikop, she was hitting an ammunition depot 40 kilometers south of Stalingrad. By the time Wehrmacht intelligence completed verification and distributed findings through command structure, she had completed another 67 missions, advancing toward her eventual 852. On January 22, 1943, 3 weeks after German High Command's formal briefing, she destroyed a German tank repair facility near Rostov, her 479th mission. 18 tanks under repair burned completely. German casualty reports listed 23 mechanics killed, 41 wounded. She returned to base, refueled, and flew 2 additional missions that night. Her perspective on the discovery, recorded in post-war interviews, was characteristically direct. "We didn't fly to prove women could fight. We flew to kill fascists. Whether they knew we were women made no difference to our bomb. The discovery changed nothing operational. The night witches continued flying, and Germans continued dying." After the war, Soviet and Allied interrogators collected testimonies from German prisoners during routine debriefing conducted between 1945 and 1947. When interrogators asked former Eastern Front personnel about their experiences with Soviet air operation, particularly night operation, an unexpected pattern emerged. Even hardened Waffen-SS officers, men who rarely showed visible emotion during interrogation sessions, displayed distinct reactions when questioned about night witch. The consistency across hundreds of interviews, conducted by different interrogators across multiple detention facilities, established that German forces had experienced something unprecedented. Testimonies revealed psychological impact that extended far beyond normal combat stress. Oberleutnant Heinrich Rosbach, U-88 night fighter pilot assigned to Nachtjagdgeschwader 4, captured near Prague in May 1945, provided testimony during interrogation at Soviet facility near Kharkov in September 1945. "Command assigned my unit to intercept these aircraft in August 1942. They provided tactical briefing about slow-moving harassment aircraft, but disclosed nothing about personnel composition. I learned they were women only after Germany surrendered. I attempted interception 23 times across 10 months, 23 failures. Every engagement ended identically. I would detect target acoustically, vector toward position, attempt to reduce speed for weapons acquisition. Stall warnings would activate. Aircraft buffeting would force me to increase power and abort. It was professionally humiliating. You train 6 years to master the Ju-88. You face British Lancaster bombers successfully. You understand air combat doctrine and physics. Then wooden biplanes from 1928 make you appear incompetent. When I learned after surrender that these pilots were women, I had no word. We couldn't catch them because physics prevented engagement. Gender was operationally irrelevant. They had exploited the laws of aerodynamics in ways our doctrine never anticipated. Hauptmann Josef Weber, Flak Battery, commander in eastern Ukraine captured April 1945, interrogated June 1945. My battery, 6 18mm guns and 12 20mm automatic cannons fired approximately 47,000 rounds at these aircraft between September 1942 and October 1943. We achieved confirmed hits, perhaps 4 times. The aircraft would approach with engines audible at distance. We would calculate trajectory, prepare firing solution, then silence, complete silence. We would fire at where acoustic calculations suggested they should be, but we were shooting at ghosts. Sound would return only after bombs exploded. Men under my command experienced severe psychological deterioration. We feared the silence more than the explosion. The silence meant bombs were already falling, already too late for defensive action. Learning after the war that these pilots were women only emphasized how completely we had underestimated Soviet tactical innovation. Gender changed nothing about effectiveness. Common themes emerged across testimony, striking consistency. Nearly every German veteran who encountered night witches mentioned the psychological impact of silence specifically. Repeated descriptions of failed interception attributed to speed differential appeared in pilot testimony. Almost universal shock characterized responses when interrogators revealed the 588th Regiment's gender composition, though several attempted rationalization, suggesting Soviet propaganda had exaggerated female involvement percentages. Others acknowledged plainly that gender made no operational difference. Effectiveness was undeniable regardless. Multiple testimonies included phrase variants of, "We couldn't intercept what flew slower than our minimum speed." Several Germans mentioned specific Night Witch aircraft by reputation, identified through distinctive repair patterns or marking, though rarely knowing pilot name. There was consistent acknowledgement that propaganda about Soviet military inferiority had been fundamentally wrong. Some testimonies referenced Nadezhda Popova specifically, though often without knowing her name initially, identifying her instead through aircraft characteristics or operational patterns. Lieutenant Karl Steiner, infantry officer with the 198th Infantry Division, provided testimony during British interrogation in 1946. There was one specific aircraft our unit learned to recognize. It had distinctive pattern of canvas patches covering bullet holes across both wings. This aircraft appeared over our positions approximately twice weekly for 8 months. We began referring to it informally as the persistent ghost because it would invariably arrive in complete silence. I personally witnessed this aircraft's attacks 11 times. On July 3, 1943, it destroyed our divisional ammunition, causing secondary explosions that killed 18 men. On August 29, 1943, it hit our command post, killing battalion commander and 3 staff officers. After German surrender, I reviewed Soviet military records during repatriation processing. Intelligence officer showed me 588th Regiment documentation. Based on operational dates and sector, this was almost certainly Lieutenant Nadezhda Popova. Soviet records indicated she flew 852 missions total, 852 combat sorties. We never came remotely close to shooting her down. She was completely untouchable. Popova learned about German prisoner testimonies during post-war years as Soviet military historians compiled operational records. Her response, documented in multiple interviews, reflected consistent focus on mission over recognition. Her mission tempo never decreased despite German awareness. Between the November 1942 discovery and war's end in May 1945, she flew 440 additional missions, maintaining average operational tempo of approximately 16 missions per month, despite increasing German air defenses and deteriorating weather conditions in final winter. Her final mission count of 852, including the legendary 18 missions in single night on March 31, 1943, became documented not just in Soviet military records, but in German testimonies that confirmed their operational impact from enemy perspective. Her post-war reflection remained characteristically focused. We did what needed doing. Whether they respected us, or feared us, or were humiliated by us was their concern, not ours. Our concern was victory. We achieved that. The testimonies confirmed what Germans had discovered too late. The Night Witches weren't anomalies or propaganda fabrication. They were among the most effective tactical weapons deployed on the Eastern Front, and Nadezhda Popova was among the deadliest of them all. When the war in Europe ended on May 9, 1945, Nadezhda Popova's final record stood as testament to what Germans had dismissed as impossible 3 years earlier. 852 combat missions. The number itself defied comprehension. Each mission represented takeoff in darkness, navigation without instruments, exposure to ground fire and potential interception, bombs dropped manually, return flight in aircraft that could be shredded by single bullet in wrong location. 852 times she accepted those risks and survived. The operational mathematics were staggering. From May 1942 through May 1945, 36 months of continuous operation, she averaged 23.7 missions per month. During intense campaign periods, the rate increased to 40 missions monthly. Total flight hours exceeded 1,700, almost entirely conducted at night in open cockpit at temperatures reaching minus 40 degrees Celsius. Total bombs delivered approximately 170,000 kilograms, 85 tons of high explosives dropped with precision onto German position. She destroyed documented targets, including ammunition, vehicle concentration, command posts, communication center, fuel storage facility, troop barrack, Conservative estimates placed German casualties directly attributable to her missions at over 300 killed, with material losses exceeding 12 million Reichsmarks. She survived the entire war without being shot down, though her aircraft sustained damage on 47 separate occasions. Soviet High Command awarded her Hero of the Soviet Union, Order of the Red Banner twice, Order of the Red Star, multiple campaign medals. Physical toll was permanent. Frostbite scars covered her hands and face. Hearing damage from 3 years of engine noise 20 meters from her head required medical treatment. Psychological resilience required to fly 852 missions, knowing each could be fatal, defied normal human capacity for sustained courage. To understand the magnitude of these numbers, context matters immensely. The most accomplished German night fighter pilots completed 40 to 60 missions before being killed, captured, or rotated from combat duty. Popova's 852 missions represented more than 14 complete German pilot careers. United States Army Air Force rotated bomber crews home after 25 missions, considered full combat tour with medal authorization. Popova completed equivalent of 34 full American tours of duty, without rotation, without rest assignment, without reprieve. Average Soviet male bomber pilot accumulated 150 to 300 missions before death, injury, or reassignment. She tripled the high end of that range. Within her own regiment, average Night Witch completed 500 to 600 missions. She exceeded regimental average by 250 missions, nearly 50% more than her peers flying identical aircraft under identical conditions. If each mission averaged 2 hours flight time, her 852 missions represented 1,704 hours airborne in combat conditions. If each mission averaged 200-kilogram bomb load, total tonnage delivered was 170 metric tons. Estimated German casualties and material destroyed through her missions specifically: 317 killed, over 800 wounded, material damage valued at 12.4 million Reichsmarks in 1945 currency. By any metric, Nadezhda Popova's operational record represented one of the most sustained combat performances in aviation history, and she achieved it in an aircraft Germans considered too primitive to matter. The 588th Night Bomber Regiment's collective record validated Soviet High Command's controversial 1941 decision to authorize all-female combat aviation units. Total missions flown by regiment exceeded 23,000 combat sorties across 3 years' continuous operation. Total bombs dropped surpassed 3,000 tons of high explosives delivered onto German positions across southern and eastern front sectors. German casualties inflicted were conservatively estimated at 5,000 killed with 15,000 wounded, though incomplete German records make precise calculation impossible. Material destroyed included hundreds of ammunition dumps, thousands of vehicles, countless supply depots, communication centers, command posts. Operational period from May 1942 through May 1945 represented uninterrupted combat operations regardless of weather, season, or German countermeasure. Regiment casualties totaled 32, killed from approximately 80 personnel, producing survival rate of 96.8%. Unprecedented in any Soviet bomber unit. Conventional Soviet bomber regiments suffered 40 to 60% casualty. The cost-effectiveness calculation was devastating to German strategic planning. Regiment total cost approximately $2 million American, including aircraft, training, ammunition, and 3 years operational support. Damage inflicted on German forces was valued at over $50 million in destroyed materiel alone, not including personnel casualty or operational disruption. Germans expended 125 million Reichsmarks attempting to counter Night Witch operations through air defense systems, fighter operation, and dedicated countermeasures. Cost ratio exceeded 1 to 60. Soviets invested $1. Germans spent 60, attempting to counter it. 0 confirmed aerial kills of Night Witches by German fighters across entire war. Almost all regiment losses came from concentrated ground fire, not air combat, validating the fundamental premise that PO-2 aircraft were essentially uninterceptable by conventional means. But numbers alone don't capture the strategic value the 588th Regiment provided. Psychological warfare impact on German troops was documented extensively in post-war testimony. Degraded morale from chronic sleep deprivation, superstitious fear of silent attacks, inability to defend against unseen threat. Resource diversion was substantial. Over 5,000 German soldiers tied down in air defense roles that could have been deployed to frontline combat positions. Tactical disruption of supply lines forced Germans to route convoys longer distance on more vulnerable roads, increasing fuel consumption and exposure to partisan attack. Propaganda value domestically was incalculable. Proof that Soviet women could fight effectively boosted civilian morale and validated total war mobilization. German miscalculation was exposed systematically. Every assumption about gender, technology, and air combat doctrine proved wrong when confronted with operational reality. The regiment demonstrated asymmetric warfare model that would influence military thinking for decades. Small investment in unconventional tactics, producing strategic impact, disproportionate to resources committed. Marshal Georgy Zhukov noted in his memoir, "The night witches cost us almost nothing and cost the Germans everything they spent trying to stop them." This represented perfect efficiency in warfare. The 588th Regiment proved that technological superiority matters less than tactical innovation, and that determination can overcome engineering advantages. Nadezhda Popova's 852 mission embodied this principle completely. After the war ended, Nadezhda Popova faced challenges different from 3 years of nightly combat, but no less demanding. Initial recognition came immediately. Hero of the Soviet Union medal presentation, parades through Moscow, speeches at youth rallies. But returning to civilian existence after 852 combat missions proved psychologically difficult. The transition from nightly life-threatening operations to peacetime routine created profound disorientation, common among combat veterans. She chose to remain in aviation, becoming flight instructor at military academy, teaching new generation of Soviet pilots the skills she had perfected through unprecedented operational experience. In 1946, she married Semyon Kharlamov, fellow pilot she had met during the war. They remained together until his death. She spoke periodically about her experiences, but never sought celebrity, preferring to honor fallen comrades rather than celebrate personal achievements. She maintained close relationships with surviving squadron members, attending annual reunions until age made travel impossible. Soviet recognition fluctuated with political climate. Stalin's government was ambivalent about war heroes who gained independent fame, though her hero of the Soviet Union status provided some protection. Khrushchev's government celebrated her more openly as symbol of Soviet achievement. Later governments preserved her story as heritage. She lived to age 92, dying July 8, 2013 in Moscow, one of last surviving night witches. Russian Air Force honored her full military funeral. Monuments in her hometown commemorate her service. For decades, the night witches remained virtually unknown in Western nations. Cold War tensions meant Soviet military achievements were dismissed as propaganda or ignored entirely. Western historians had limited access to Soviet archives, and German testimony remained classified or unpublished. The story existed in Soviet accounts but couldn't be verified through independent sources, leading to skepticism about its veracity. Glasnost in late 1980s allowed more information to emerge as archives opened partially. Historians gained access to German military records in 1990 following reunification, discovering testimonies that validated Soviet accounts completely. The night witches weren't propaganda, but documented historical fact confirmed by enemy sources. Books appeared in English during 2000s as researchers compiled comprehensive accounts from Soviet, German, and personal testimony sources. Documentaries brought visual representation to Western audiences unfamiliar with Eastern Front detail. Modern recognition has expanded substantially. Russian Air Force Museum features permanent exhibit on 588th Regiment. Monuments and memorials exist across former Soviet Union. Streets and schools bear names of regiment members. Films, graphic novels, and historical accounts continue appearing. Nadezhda Popova specifically is honored with displays at aviation museums, her aircraft markings preserved, her mission logs archived. The story's Western discovery timeline illustrates how historical narratives depend on access. Truth existed continuously, but verification required decades. The story of Nadezhda Popova and the Night Witches transcends its specific historical moment, offering lessons applicable far beyond World War II aviation. In warfare, Asymmetric tactics consistently defeat technological superiority when applied intelligently. Psychological impact sometimes exceeds physical damage. German sleep deprivation and fear arguably damaged combat effectiveness more than destroyed materiel. Innovation matters more than resource. Soviet tactical creativity with obsolete equipment outperformed German engineering excellence. Underestimating adversaries based on preconception creates exploitable vulnerability. German assumptions about gender and aircraft primitiveness blinded them to genuine threat until costs became unsustainable. Prejudice doesn't just offend morally, it creates tactical weaknesses enemies exploit. Your adversary's apparent weakness may constitute their actual strength. POW slowness made it uninterceptable. Canvas construction made it damage-resistant. Simplicity enabled operational tempo. Physics and engineering lessons emerge clearly. Sometimes simple design beats complex systems in specific operational contexts. Understanding your environment matters more than general capability. Stahl-Spieh's paradox made sophisticated German fighters useless. Constraints force innovation. Inability to communicate by radio produced silent gliding tactics. The right tool for specific job isn't always the most advanced tool available. Determination and human will remain decisive factors. Flying 852 missions required extraordinary resilience beyond normal human capacity. Each mission could be fatal, yet she continued. Physical and psychological toll was immense. Frostbite, hearing damage, chronic stress. Survival required skill, luck, and absolute refusal to quit. These factors combined to produce results that pure statistics cannot fully capture. The German officer who laughed at women in crop dusters never understood what he faced until those wooden biplanes had destroyed his base twice and killed soldiers under his command. What Nadezhda Popova and her sisters proved across 852 missions and 23,000 regimental sorties was that courage requires no advanced equipment, that skill overcomes raw power, and that determination makes physics itself irrelevant when applied with intelligence and precision. Her missions weren't simply combat operations. They were systematic proof that Germans had calculated everything except the variable that mattered most. The will to fight combined with tactical innovation. In wooden biplanes that German engineers declared operationally impossible against an enemy that refused to take them seriously until costs became catastrophic. Flying slower than German physics allowed interception, gliding in silence that terrified soldiers who couldn't defend against invisible threat. The Night Witches demonstrated that the most dangerous weapon isn't necessarily the most powerful. It's the weapon your enemy never sees coming until explosions illuminate their faces, searching empty darkness for ghosts that destroyed them.